Welcome and greetings. I am Vimala M, UG Program Coordinator and Assistant Professor, Department of Psychology, Kristu Jayanti College, Bengaluru. Today, I will be speaking about a topic called as in research. And the reason for research is now the present education system is completely based upon the research. Why the need of research is very important? Why? Because it improves the advanced knowledge as well as the critical thinking among students and explores teachers to adapt to a new teaching and learning process. So can we go back to the session which is on basics in research? So the first point what we'll talk about is the meaning and definition of research. So the word research is composed of two syllables, that is re and search. The dictionary defines the former as in a prefix meaning again and a new and over again and the latter as in a verb, meaning to examine closely and carefully, to test and try to probe it. So it's usually the research what we call about is actually existing informations are there and we are expected to as a researcher to research on what we can do better in those papers or the theory or the concepts. So the scientific research is a systematic and objective attempt to provide answers to certain questions. The purpose of scientific research is to discover and develop an organized body of knowledge. Therefore, scientific research may be defined as the systematic and empirical analysis and recording of controlled observations which may lead to the development of theories, concepts, generalizations, and principles, resulting in the prediction and control of those activities that may have some cause and effect relationship. So there are a lot of definitions given by many psychologists or the researchers who has defined a research in their own way. So the first of all, we'll move on to the definition given by Dharmendra in 1973, who defines research as a systematic, controlled, empirical and critical investigation of hypothetical propositions about a presumed relationship about various phenomena. The other person, Burns, in 1994, also defines research as a systematic investigation to find an answer to a problem. The term research refers to a systematic method consisting of enunciating the problem, formulating an hypothesis, collecting the facts or the data, analyzing the facts and reaching certain conclusions either in the form of solutions towards concerned problem or in a certain generalization for some theoretical formulation. Now, after research, we go to what are the criteria, what are the different criteria we need to follow for a good research. So there are certain criteria which has been mentioned by the experts to call that as a good research. The first point what we talk about is the purpose of research should be clearly defined and a common concept that are used should be operationally defined. The research procedure should be precisely planned, focused and appropriately described in order to enable the other researcher to do research for the further advancement. Research design should be carefully planned to generate results to maintain objectivity. The research report should be as much as possible frank enough to gauge effects of the findings. The data analysis in the research report should be adequate to reveal its significance and the method of analysis employed to appropriate and validate and reliability of data should be examined carefully. The purpose of research is to discover answers to questions through the application of scientific procedures. The main aim of the research is to find out the truth which is hidden and which has to be discovered as yet, which has not been discovered as yet. To gain familiarity with the phenomenon or to achieve a new insights into it, to portray accurately the characteristics of a particular individual, situation or a group, to determine the frequency with which something occurs or with which it is associated with something else, to test a hypothesis of a causal relationship between the variables is what we study in the research. Moving on, after the criteria, we'll move on to the qualities of a good research. So apart from the criteria, we also should have qualities to determine what is called as a good research. So there are certain points which explains as what are the good qualities of a good research. So the first point would be the good research is systematic. It means that research is structured according to set of rules to follow certain steps in a specified sequence. Systematic research also invites creative thinking and certainly avoids use of guessing and intuition for arriving at a conclusion. The second point which explains the quality of a good research is a good research is empirical, which implies that any conclusion drawn is based upon the hardcore evidence gathered from the information collected from real life experiences and observations. This provides a basis for external ability to research results. And the third point is good research is valid and verifiable. So research involves precise observation and accurate description. The researcher selects reliable and valid instrument to be used in the collection of data and uses some statistical measures for accurate description of the results obtained. Whatever you conclude on the basis of finding is correct and can be verified by yourself and others. A good research is a logical. It suggests that research is guided by the rules of reasoning and logical process of induction, which is nothing but general to specific, and the deduction, which is nothing but specific to general, that plays an important role in carrying out research. In fact, logical reasoning makes research feasible and more meaningful in the context of decision making. A good research also develops theories and principles, which are very helpful in accurate prediction regarding the variables under study. On the basis of the sample observed and studied, the researcher makes sound generalization regarding the whole populations. Research is replicable. So the designs, the procedures and the results of a scientific research should be replicable so that any person other than the researcher himself may access their validity. Thus, one researcher may use or transit the results obtained by another researcher. The procedures and the results of a research are replicable as well as transmittable. Now, moving on to the next topic, that is in the steps in the research process. So, there are certain steps which have to be followed when you are doing a research. So, there are 4 main steps which we have to follow when you are doing within a research. The first step is identification of a problem. The first point is identification of a problem. The second step could be the formulating hypothesis, and the third step could be the identifying and manipulating the controlling variables, and the fourth step would be the formulating the research design. So now moving on to the first step, that is the identification of the problem. The first and the most important step for identifying a problem is asking a question or identifying a need that arises as a result of curiosity and to which it becomes necessary to find an answer. The psychological studies are focused on one or many of the following kinds of questions. So the first question can arise when you are identifying a problem is, what are the events that cause or determine a given behavior or a response? The next question would be, what is the nature of a behavior or an action, that is, and how it is linked with other actions and behaviors? And the third question could be, what are the relationship of internal psychological process with behavioral phenomenon? And review of literature is one point where it forms the body prior to the work of identification of problem or a research problem. The next step could be the formulating an hypothesis. So when a research has identified the problem and reviewed the relevant literature, he formulates an hypothesis which is a kind of suggested answer to the problem. So hypothesis plays a key role in formulating and guiding any research study. The hypotheses are generally derived from the early research findings, existing theories, and personal observations and experiences. Hypothesis may be defined as a tentative statement showing a relationship between the variables under a study. It is stated in the form of a declarative sentence. For instance, suppose you are interested in knowing the effect of reward on learning, that can be studied under those variables. Now, the step 3 would be identifying, manipulating, and controlling the variables. So, variables are defined as those characteristics which are manipulated, controlled, and observed by the experimenter. At least there are 3 types of variables must be recognized at the outset of the research. The first one would be the independent variable, the second one would be the dependent variable, and the third one would be the extraneous variable. The first one would be the dependent variable. It is one about which the prediction is made on the basis of experiment. The dependent variable is the characteristics or a condition that changes the experimenter and changes the independent variables. For example, if you take or consider mobile phone usage as an impact on the sleep deprivation, and this sleep deprivation can affect the emotional disturbances. So where there are three variables which has been considered here. One is the mobile phone usage, the other one is sleep deprivation and the emotional disturbances. So here the mobile phone usage becomes the independent variable, sleep deprivation becomes the dependent variable, and the emotional disturbances becomes the extraneous variable, because by using a mobile phone which is an independent variable, your sleep deprivation is affected. You are deprived of sleep, so that becomes a dependent variable. And if you are deprived of a sleep, it can affect your emotional disturbances, which can become the extraneous variable. The independent variable is a condition or a characteristics which is manipulated or selected by the experimenter in order to find out its relationship to some observed phenomena. And the extraneous variable is the uncontrolled variable that may affect the dependent variable. The experimenter is not interested in the changes produced due to the extraneous variable, and hence he tries to control it as far as practicable. The extraneous variable is also known as the relevant variable. Now the next step is step 4, which is nothing but the formulating a research design. The main purpose of an experimental design is to help the researcher in manipulating the independent variables freely and to provide maximum control of the extraneous variable, so that it may be said with all certainty that the experimental change is due to only one manipulation of the experimental variable. The next purpose of the experimental design is to explain how you will find the answers to your research questions, and this research design sets out a logic to your research inquiry. A research design should include the following logistic arrangements which have to be made according to the proposed research design: the measurement, the procedures, the sampling strategies, and the frame of analysis and the time frame has to be clearly defined. For any investigation, the selection of an appropriate research design is crucial and is enabling you or a researcher to arrive at a valid findings and comparisons and conclusion. Thank you for watching, and see you all in the next video.